Hello, Dominic. Delighted to be chatting to you. Myself and Steve Evans here.
Hi, Dominic.
Hi, guys.
Good
Hi.
to meet you.
Hi.
Yeah. Dominic,
Right.
you're a screenwriter, producer, and actor. And before we talk about your brilliant career, can I just ask you about the COVID that you had? You totally recovered. You haven't got this long COVID.
Yeah, I had a very nasty COVID right at the beginning, just before the lockdown. You know, when we were all screaming for a lockdown, or government do something, and Boris was saying, "Wash your hands," and Jacob Rees-Mogg was saying, you know, sing the national anthem. Boris was going around hospitals shaking everyone's hand. I got it, and it did that thing of having a week of being fine, not even sure it's COVID, it's just not, you know, a bit fluey. And then it turned at the end of that week, which I think happened to a lot of people. If you're going to get it, it's at the end of the week, and then it goes, and you either get better or you get a lot worse. And I got a lot worse, and it was hideous, terrifying. But in answer to your question, I did get long COVID. I think I definitely did. I had maybe about a year of shortness of breath, weird circulation, and they x-rayed me, I think not quite a year later, and said, yeah, you've still got it on your lungs. And it was pretty bad. I mean, I think I'm fine now, maybe a little bit less full-throated than I used to be, and certainly chastened, because it felt like could have gone very badly wrong, you know. But here I am, smiling.
That's the good news. Yeah.
Good, yeah. So at least you got over it. Well, up here to have done, so that's good. So how did you start out in this, in your career then, Dominic, in the film world? Was there a film school of screenwriters, or was it something that came after school or later in life?
Do you know what? There almost was nothing in those days. That's how old I am now. There was the National Film School, which was like gold dust to get into and onto. I think this is probably wrong, but I think, like, you know, they maybe had 6 people in production, 6 people who wanted to be directors, something like that. And it was just like a thing that it was impossible to even think about trying to get on. And there was no such thing as a writer's school, I think I'm safe in saying. And the way people went into screenwriting in those days was coming out of theatre. So you get a playwright to come and do you a screenplay. And that's the route that my brother took. He was a playwright first, and then television spots you as a talent and picks you up, and maybe movies too. And that's what happened to him. And it was only really, I would say, in the 90s that it became okay to just start out in screen rather than to have already had a decent career in the theatre. And my journey was, I mean, I don't know how helpful it is to anybody else, really. It was, depending on how you look at it, what I did was I read, you know, my advice to budding writers is to just read scripts, you know, read what other people have written. And I managed to, you know, first of all, I didn't want to be a screenwriter at all. It wasn't anything to do with the arts, because I felt as though I had a brother who was already too successful in that field, and I didn't want to, you know, I had all these shiny siblings, and our sisters are very sort of accomplished.
This film behind me as well, Dominic.
Yeah. My sisters are brilliant women, and I just wanted to, and I was the 5th, and I wanted to plow my own furrow. You know, I wanted to be my own man, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but thought it might go and work in finance or something like that. I was good at economics, and but then as my colleagues drifted away into finance, I found myself not really interested in that. So I started out directing traffic on a commercial in Ireland, and I met some great people who were making commercials at a time when commercials was a really interesting thing to be doing and very well funded. And so I worked with them for a little bit, but then I quickly realized that what they called films were rarely more than 30 seconds long, and I was a bit more interested in telling a proper story. So I thought I have to admit defeat and admit to myself that I want to write. And so it's, you know, relatively late. I think people who are good writers often have been writing in their teens, you know, sort of writing at lunchtime at school while everyone else is playing. You know, they just have that in their genes. Yeah. But I really did have to teach myself. And so I read, in those days, there were regional ITV companies like Granada and Tettons and all those people, and you could go to them and they all had lots of scripts to read or books that might be adapted into TV shows that you could read. They'd pay you 30 quid or something. You go off and read this fat book and then write a report, which would take half a week to do. So it wasn't a very good way to earn a living, but it was a good way to learn, and to learn and to see how other people write successfully or unsuccessfully, and then to see how the buyers respond to that material, and to be part of the conversation with them, even if you're only briefly in the office, you know. So you begin to learn that way, and I did that for 2-3 years, and eventually had the confidence to start writing my own stuff. But at that point, I found myself completely and utterly broke and demoralized, because you're spending all your time on your own. And my partner got fed up with me. She said, "This wanting to be a writer is a hopeless endeavor, and you know, we need to get on with our lives, and you know, try and get a mortgage, and you know, start a family and all that stuff. And so you've got to stop doing that. That's nonsense. Better stop it." So I had to stop it, because she can be quite firm. And I took the first job that came my way, and I was thinking of, it was pre-Uber, obviously. I was thinking of being a minicab driver in Fulham. And I think I would have been quite a bad minicab driver. A job came up being an assistant to a producer on a show, an ITV series called 99 to 1, starring Billy Whitelaw and Madhur Jaffrey, the actor chef. It was a bizarre show. It was a sort of gang show, you know, with sort of, you know, criminals who talk like that, "I'll kill you," with their, you know, their teeth, lots of teeth acting. And then these two rather grand women who were caught up in the sort of horrible gang thing with money problems, who tried to resolve everything by cooking a samosa. Why don't we all have a samosa and everything will be all right? It was a very strange sort of clash of tones. But we worked on that show and we did our job and we made it. And at the end of that, and I had a great time working with this producer and got a mortgage, and we did start a family, and that was all lovely. And then at the end of that, the production company, which in its heyday was in its heyday, they were the original producers of Inspector Morse. So we've got a new job. Do you want to do it? It's in Scotland, and it's called Hamish Macbeth, and it's about dope smoking copper in the Highlands.
Robbie Carlyle.
Bobby Carlyle, and at that point, this producer Deirdre Keir, who I worked with and loved, had realised that, you know, from hours and hours every week spent together, that I was, you know, good on hot on story and scripts. So she said, "I think you should be the script editor of this show," which is was a very powerful job in them days. And so I learned loads as the script editor, and as the show rolled on, I ended up writing quite a lot of it. So that was how I got my break, in a way, by giving up trying to be a writer and just going to work in any job that came along, which happened to be totally by chance with someone who was a drama producer, who then recognized the strengths that I had honed, you know, that work that I'd done on my own came into play.
Dominic, as a script editor,
super lucky.
Can I ask, do you create a Bible for like a television series? Is that like a main role for the script editor?
It really does depend. Listen, it's changed probably a lot since those days, but you know, we're talking 1994. Yes, it depends on the show, and yeah, the job is liaising with the writers, maybe hiring, you know, putting writers forward to be hired. So reading their scripts, talking to them, and then talking to them about how the series might go, what the overall shape of it might be. Yeah, you could write some of that down. Or that might be the job of the hero writer, the first writer in, to say, "I think we do this across the piece. Or sometimes the producer would do that. And then you would get the scripts in and you'd be the first line of attack. You know, you'd say, I don't think that character works. Do you want to have a, before I share it with the producer, do you want to have a look at this? Or how about if you have her say that there and then move that scene over there? And, you know, it's a kind of nuts and bolts job. And if you're wanting to be a writer and you have those sorts of skills, obviously you're much more useful to a writer as an editor that way, unless you're so busy wanting to be a writer that you want to elbow them out of the way and do it yourself, which is always the fine dance that goes on.
Yeah, so you created that fantastic series, Doc Martin, of course. How did you get the green light to go ahead with that? And did you have a lot of say in or input into characters or the people that played the characters, or was that anything to do with you, or did you just get to write it full stop?
Martin Clunes hired me and his wife, who is his producer.
Wow.
They hired me. So it would have been quite strange to say Martin shouldn't be in it. Although probably sometimes I did think that. But no, he's brilliant in it. So they knew they wanted a show about a doctor in Cornwall. Those were the givens. And I think I was quite candid at the time, said I wouldn't watch that show because it's got cuddly Martin Clunes in it. You know, that lovely one, the lovely one from Men Behaving Badly. It will be all chocolate boxy and, you know, shallow, and it will look pretty, and it will be just too slight. And I don't know how, you know, how do you do that in a sort of 1 hour format where you actually need story? You can't just have a few laughs. And actually, it'll just be a show that'll be on Sunday night, and it'll just, I don't know, I don't really think I'd want to watch it. You know, it'll just be too sweet. And, but then that got me thinking, well, actually, what would be surprising? Like, if you think you know what that show is, when you see it in the Radio Times, how can you subvert that expectation? So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if Martin was nasty, you know? Just make him really unlikable and brusque and not at all the persona you've seen him play before. And that really worked, and he really loved that idea. And so that was really my core. People think it's about a show about a guy who is a doctor but is scared of blood, which it is. But I think it's actually a show about a misanthrope who you know can't get on with people, but knows that he should and wants to try, and that's the real reason why he's given up being a you know, the sort of god figure in a hospital in London and gone to put himself into a little surgery in Cornwall. Is because he knows he'll have to be part of the community.
Not in my surgery, thank you. Dogs are full of disease. Any other problems?
I've lost my cat.
That's not a medical problem, is it?
Bad days now and again. It's nothing to worry about.
I don't think that's good enough. I mean, God knows there isn't enough for you to do in this village. It would be nice to think that we had a policeman who could at least leave the police station and go and deal with it. If I give people advice, they seem to want a prescription, or if I give them a prescription, then they want advice. And one in the evening, before going to bed. Or you can just die.
Why do you have to upset everyone? Why can't you make an effort? Just smile. Try some small talk. Have a laugh.
Sick people don't want to laugh. They want a doctor who knows what he's doing.
Chalk and cheese, the pair of you. She likes people.
Are you saying that I don't?
I'm not criticising you, Marty. You are. Well, you're you.
I have an aversion to the sight of blood and the smell of burning flesh. It's extremely inconvenient.
And deep in his heart, he knows he's flawed and he wants to try and fix it. And I think that's why, for me, that's what gives the show its longevity, is actually there's a guy who's trying to sort himself out, and it's funny watching him fuck up, and funny, you know, and sweet when he tries. And so that was the sort of architectural idea. And the frightened of blood thing came up out of some research, actually. You know, it was an extraordinary thing that someone told me that was a true story, but that's just a gag. Actually, it's just a running gag. the real thing is about what the personality underneath is trying to achieve. And so I wrote that, and I wrote the pilot script, and we took it to ITV, and they were horrified. They said, "Oh, we thought it was going to be a nice show. We thought it was going to be like Heartbeat." And I said, well, I just think that's horrible. I wouldn't watch that show. I mean, the reason Heartbeat was coming to an end was that it had, you know, served its purpose, but the world had moved on. And
I'm thinking The Darling Buds of May as well, in the same sort of context.
Yeah. Oh, that was a classy show. When I was a script reader, that was the one script I read. Yeah. They had a thing called the pool in those days where you could read the scripts of other people's other ITV companies' planned projects. So you get a certain number of hours on the channel per company, and then there'd be a pool where it's called the flexi pool, where the best man wins, the best idea wins. So what they used to do is save up their good projects to try and win them in the flexi pool, and everyone would read each other's offers. And so I was sent, I think it must have been Granada, right? This script, The Darling Buds of May by Bob Larby, and I read it. I was like, oh, I just went back to it and I said, don't even bother trying to compete against this show. This show is magic. It's gold. Yeah. It's going to be huge. And yeah, so they rejected the show, and I had been working for Hallmark, you know, doing American stuff and being paid well, but not getting anything on British TV. And I got fed up going to parties and people saying, "What are you writing?" And I couldn't explain to them what I was doing because nothing was ever on UK telly. And I thought, I'm British, I've got to do something set in Britain that British people see, and I can hold my head up when the conversation is becoming ridiculous. So I put all this time, I was so sure it was the right thing to do. You know, how can you go wrong with Martin Clunes and a basically good idea? I put all my time into it, and then it was rejected. And I thought, oh, I remember sitting in the garden of my new home that I'd paid for with American money, but obviously mortgaged to the hilt, still is, by the way, and sitting in the back garden looking back at the house and saying to my partner, I've screwed up, because I thought, you know, I put all this time into this show and I think we might have to sell. We've only just moved in, but I think we might have to sell this house. And because it would be another year to find another show and develop it and get it commissioned, and you don't really earn any money until things get made. So we're 2 or more years into a whacking great mortgage with no money. So I've screwed up. I shouldn't have given up the American coin. And then so it was a very sad time for us, and Martin Clunes stood by the script that I'd written. He didn't want to change it either, and that was the right call, because there wasn't an idea beyond, you know, he's grumpy and, you know, sort of slightly autistic in his presentation. And 2 weeks later they phoned up and said, all right, then if you insist, we'll buy it from you, we will make it, you know. Oh. And it was a very strange experience, because then we didn't, that was the idea, so we weren't being difficult, we just didn't know how to change it. That was the concept. And then a few months later, 2 or 3 months later, we started rolling, and we had, you know, 2 or 3 more scripts, and we had a read through for all the cast, you know, thing just before you start shooting. Everyone gets together to hear the script with the voices of the actors who will play the roles. And the one of the ITV bosses, there were 2 of them in a double act, and she was resigning. They were moving on. They'd had their very good tenure and they were moving on. And she sat next to me through the script, and I was very uncomfortable, because I thought, this is the script you rejected and you don't really like this show, do you? You're only grudgingly backing it. And at the end of it, she turned to me and she said, "Dominic, congratulations." And I thought she'd been sarcastic. She said, "No, this show will be a mainstay of ITV drama schedules for years to come."
Wow.
Is right.
And then she left. And I thought, if I'm missing something here, because you didn't want this show, you wanted me to completely rewrite it. And of course, I didn't think she was right, because at the beginning of something, even though you dream and you try and construct something in your show to have longevity, and that's an interesting challenge. You don't dare to dream that. I mean, your dream is you might do well enough to get another series commissioned, or season, as we now have to say, second season. Yeah. That is the milestone, and it's a long way off. The idea that you could dominate the schedules is for the birds. So I didn't really believe her, but it turned out to be the case.
Did you get a chance to go and visit any filming for the screenplays that you've been involved with? Did you actually get to go on the set? Or you're interested
nowadays I try and run the show.
Yeah.
So not to say that I wouldn't write something that I wasn't running, because I would if it was a good idea and I thought I would be a good writer for it. But my ambition is to be in charge of the production.
Okay. Have you got your own production company? Is this Island Productions?
Yeah, Island Pictures. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
So I advertise myself these days as a showrunner, and actually, you only get to be hired in that role if you're deemed to be a desired writer. So it comes out of being a writer, but actually it's not got anything to do with writing, but it's a production job. And it's several jobs rolled into one, and I really like that. I like I love being part of a crew and being part of a gang, and I like being in charge. But I like being in charge because I like the producing responsibility, not because I want to, I've written a scene and it has to be shot only in the way that, and the words have to be delivered only in the way that I imagined them, last year. I mean, that's crazy. I think some writers, but only a few actually, want that sort of executive function.
Like a project manager.
It's project manager. It's a very, very hard, in the American system at any rate, it's a very challenging thing to do. There's a lot of political pressure and financial pressure, and reporting to a lot of, you're in charge, but I always say the job is the being chief recipient of blame. If anything goes wrong or looks like it might go wrong and people's jobs will be on the line, they're on the phone to you day and night. And on the last job last show running job I did, people would think nothing of saying we need to have a meeting at midnight. Oof. And I mean, crazy stuff.
Was that for Knightfall, was it, Dominic?
That was the last show I ran, was Knightfall. Yeah, which was in the American system, and that's where they give the showrunner an enormous amount of power. So it's basically you versus the money, really. But there are lots of people around many more than there are in the UK in executive roles, on big salaries, and who have to defend their private health contributions and pensions, in a state that doesn't have the same level of provision as ours, although we're getting there.
Yeah. We spoke to David Hayter. He wrote the screenplays for X-Men 1 and 2, and he was telling us that a couple of executive producers, he met them sort of on the first day of shooting, and they said, "Hi guys, we're the executive producers. If you need anything, get in touch." And then he never heard of them again.
Yeah.
It's sort of a vague title for an executive producer. Do they put the money in? Are they finance?
I mean, I think on that show that we just talked about, I think there were maybe 12 or 14 executive producers, one of whom was me. And the difference between the executive producer who runs the show and someone who just had enough authority in the mix of things to say, but I'm in charge of the New York end of this business, and I'm an executive producer, whatever it is. You know, so it's very hard as a punter, or in fact, even as someone in the business, to know whether those are just titles or whether there's actually somebody working their guts out on a show. And sometimes you can tell by the positioning of where the credit comes up. But no, it doesn't. It can mean all things to all men. But I mean, that's quite normal for there to be executive producers that you don't even really meet. It's quite normal.
Yeah.
And it's just a way of compensating people in a different way, or they've got a big enough sway to say, and they want credits on IMDb, you know, whatever. Yeah. It's fine. It's fine. It's a bit boring for the punter to do all these credits.
You're saying you have a fair bit of power there. Do you have much say in who's cast into what roles? Did you? I mean, you know, Martin came and approached you, Martin Clunes. What about Caroline Katz and people like Joe Abson? Did you have any input in them being brought in, or any of those characters, or is that completely not you?
I had almost nothing to do with the production of Doc Martin. I'm sure they would have had conversations at the time. I can't really remember. It was 2004, I think, maybe 3. I think they sort of got on with it. I had a lot on my hands trying to write forward into the show, and then I realized that I wouldn't want to stay on the show forever, and so in season 2, the part of the task was to find writers to hand over to, you know, and to give everybody. Right. So I think I wrote half the second season with my sister, and then sort of helped choose writers who would, and sort of guide them a little bit on so the show could continue without me. So no, I wasn't involved on that show in the casting really formally at all. I mean, I think the cast is fab. I think they're brilliant, and I don't look at anyone in the show and think, oh, that wasn't what I had in mind when I wrote them. In fact, they're almost perfect embodiments of the characters that were on the page. It's just one of those shows where it just came together. You know, everybody sort of got it and enjoyed it and went off and did it. And sometimes you feel that a cast is enjoying the show more than the audience is, but I didn't feel that with this. I think they really went for it, and it felt like it had an integrity. And one of the things that I remember, it's very rare that you sort of just get really excited, but I remember getting the first day's rushes. It was the first time you saw Martin in his suit, with the, you know, basically a rod up his arse, you know, just really a real tight arse, and the way he carried himself. I saw the first day's rushes. I can't remember which scene it was. I must dig them up. I think we might have thrown them away, which is awful. I had so many hundreds of DVDs that I'm never going to look at. I think we might have binned them, which is probably a bit of TV history we should have hung on to. But the first day's filming, I saw the rushes, and I just couldn't believe. I just thought, okay, we've got something special here. He really went for it. And I think when the lead actor really goes for it, really takes it seriously and really tries to inhabit a character, I think everybody else thinks, okay, we've got to do our bit. And they did. They really did. And it's been brilliant. It's made me a lot of friends around the world. You know, paid a lot of my bills, not all of them, but a lot of my bills, and feel really lucky to have had that opportunity. And there was a moment when I was dejected before the you know, I put a lot into trying to work out how do you make a show that can run and run. I didn't just fire off a script. I spent a lot of time on it. And you know, I'm really interested in series architecture. And there was one summer I was on the Isle of Wight with my family, and everyone was going to the beach, and I was wrestling with, you know, the second or third or fourth draft of this pilot script. And I wanted to go to the beach, It was a lovely day, it was a hot day, and the script was driving me mad. And I thought, it's never going to happen. It's all a waste of time. And I thought, no, because if you get this right, it could be on the telly. It could entertain a shed load of people. It could be your bread and butter for years to come. This is your job. You can't go to the beach. You've got to stay in and sit in front of a laptop and do it again. You know, just keep going. And I remember that moment. It felt like a real moment of decision. You know, am I actually going to soldier through this and actually do my very best job, or am I going to go to the beach? And the answer is, I've got to do my best work. And but I'd had no idea quite what a sort of international phenomenon it would turn out to be.